Asbestos awareness. Course aim: to raise awareness and understanding of the dangers of asbestos in the construction industry. Course objectives. By the end of this course, you will be able to name the three main types of asbestos, list the diseases caused by exposure to asbestos and understand the increased risk for smokers, list some of the likely uses and locations for asbestos products in buildings, know how to avoid the risks from asbestos, and explain the general emergency procedures should asbestos be discovered or disturbed. Relevant legal provisions. Health and Safety at Work Order NI 1978, Management of Health and Safety at Work Regulations NI 2000, PPE Regulations NI 1993, Provision and Use of Work Equipment Regulations NI 1999, Control of Asbestos at Work Regulations NI 2012, and Construction, Design and Management Regulations NI 2016. CAR 2012 and CDM 2016. Regulation 5, Identification of asbestos. An employer shall not undertake work in demolition, maintenance, or any other work unless he has carried out a suitable and sufficient assessment or assumes that asbestos is present. How do I risk assess asbestos? We need to specify where asbestos is located and its type, the quantity of asbestos present, what condition it is in, and what controls are needed to manage it and protect persons who may be exposed to it. Is it likely to be disturbed? Is there easy access to it? Is it vulnerable to damage? Is maintenance, repair, or other type of work likely to be carried out in its vicinity? The aim is to identify how the asbestos is going to be managed and what measures need to be carried out before any work begins. Control of Asbestos Regulations NI 2012 requires employers to provide information, instruction and training to all employees likely to be exposed to asbestos, not just asbestos removal workers. There are three levels of training: asbestos awareness, non-licensed asbestos removal, and licensed asbestos removal. The required content of the asbestos awareness course is listed in the approved code of practice. Control of Asbestos Regulations NI 2012 introduced more stringent standards of worker protection. Where work is carried out which may disturb asbestos, employers are required to prevent exposure and spread of asbestos. Worker exposure must not exceed the control limit of 0.1 fibres per centimetre cubed. An RPE must be worn, but the work must still be arranged to prevent the release of fibres. Surveys for asbestos-containing materials. A refurbishment and demolition survey must be carried out of a type which will, under controlled conditions, reveal any potential asbestos materials which might be in the vicinity of the area where works are planned. This is a specific requirement under the Control of Asbestos Regulations NI 2012. A visual inspection or reference to a management survey is insufficient because the management survey is not intrusive and has not been undertaken to account for any changes to the building, even of a non-structural nature. Refurbishment and demolition survey. This type of survey is used to locate and describe, as far as reasonably practicable, all asbestos-containing materials in the area where refurbishment work or demolition is planned. The survey will be fully intrusive and is a destructive inspection. It can be used in other circumstances when more intrusive maintenance and repair work is to be carried out, or for plant removal. For example, it is a specific requirement in CAR 2006 Regulation 7 for all ACMs to be removed as far as reasonably practicable before major refurbishment or final demolition. This is also appropriate in other smaller refurbishment situations, which involve structural or layout changes to buildings. The survey report should be supplied by the client to designers and contractors who may be bidding for the work so that the asbestos risk can be addressed. Where asbestos is identified so that it can be removed, the survey does not normally assess the condition of this asbestos. It points out areas where ACMs may be present. Until or if asbestos removal is undertaken, the ACM's condition will need to be assessed and the materials managed. Avoiding risk. Major refurbishment works must not start without a demolition refurbishment survey to ascertain the presence of asbestos. Any asbestos in the work area should be removed or protected. Premises should have asbestos registers. Examine them or ask the foreman where the asbestos is before starting work. If you're working somewhere where asbestos may be discovered, for example pulling down ceilings, working in loft spaces, under floors or demolishing walls, always wear disposable overalls and an FFP3 mask as a precaution. Other guidance. Approved codes of practice and health and safety executive guidance tell us how to put the law into practice. Management of asbestos in non-domestic premises, L127. Work with materials containing asbestos, L143. Asbestos essentials, HSG 210. Asbestos kills, protect yourself, INDG 419. What is asbestos? Asbestos is a mineral fibre which is a serious health hazard commonly found in our environment today. In the past, asbestos was added to a variety of products to strengthen them and to provide heat insulation and fire resistance. Employees who may work in buildings that contain asbestos should know where it is found and how to avoid exposure. Here we have pictures of the three main types of asbestos in its natural state. Here we have an example of how small asbestos fibres are. Circled we have 2 to 3 rice grains, 5 to 6 human hairs, and 20,000 asbestos fibres. Remember, asbestos is a naturally occurring substance, and everyone is exposed to very small numbers of fibres all the time. Background levels are 1 fibre or less in 10 litres of air. People can only be exposed to fibres if the material is disturbed or damaged, quantities of fibres are made airborne, and they breathe the fibres in. The risk of ill health or death is determined by concentration of respirable fibres in the air, duration of exposure to the fibres, level of respiratory protection, number of exposure events over how long a period of time, and the type of fibres you are exposed to. Asbestos is a term used to refer to 6 naturally occurring silicate minerals. The properties of asbestos: versatile, hard wearing, high tensile strength, good chemical, electrical and heat resistance, mostly resistant to acids. The general use of asbestos in the UK is now banned. Blue and brown asbestos banned in 1985 and white in 1999. Asbestos containing materials, commonly known as ACMs. This is a term that was created by government regulation. Any material that contains more than 1% asbestos is called an ACM. This is generally determined by examining the material under a microscope to see how much asbestos is present. Asbestos is composed of 6 different types of natural minerals: chrysotile white, amosite brown, and chrysotile blue, and the most dangerous. These 3 are the most common types. We also have tremolite, actinolite, and amphipholite. The colour of asbestos is not important to remember, as the only way to tell which type of asbestos is under a microscope. Asbestos fibre facts. Asbestos fibres are also virtually indestructible. Resistant to chemicals and heat, they are very stable in the environment. They do not evaporate into air or dissolve in water, and they are not broken down over time. Asbestos is probably the best insulator known to man. Because asbestos has so many useful properties, it has been used in over 3,000 different products. Here we have a map of the world showing countries who have banned asbestos. As of 2019, out of around 193 world nations, 66 nations had banned the use of all types of asbestos. Those countries generally seek to ensure that asbestos use in any areas has been expressly prohibited. Some countries allow exemptions of minor use, as specialist seals and gaskets, and some countries have an interim period where asbestos brake pads are still permitted. Roughly 140 nations around the world still permit full or partial use of asbestos with little or no regulation at all. This includes popular tourist destinations like Thailand, Caribbean islands, Bali, Mexico, Morocco, India, Vietnam, China, and many more. Thus, asbestos exposure during foreign holidays cannot be ruled out. Take special note that the United States has not banned the use of asbestos. So what's the problem? Asbestos fibres are generally not broken down to other compounds and will remain virtually unchanged over long periods. The fibres get into the air and may become inhaled into the lungs. The tiny fibres are sharp and strong. Breathe in the fibres and they get stuck in the lungs. In fact, every time you take a breath, they get drawn deeper. Health hazards if asbestos enters the body. Asbestosis. Incurable, increased risk of lung cancer, and restricts lung function. Lung cancer. A smoking asbestos worker is 75 times more likely to suffer lung cancer. Mesothelioma. Deaths estimated to peak at 2,500 in the UK years 2020 to 2025, caused by all kinds of ACMs, but particularly blue asbestos. 20 to 40 years from exposure to development, incurable and painful, small dose required, and is a form of cancer. Remember, these diseases will not affect you immediately, but later on in life. So there is a need for you to protect yourself now to prevent you contracting an asbestos-related disease in the future. As already stated, it is also important to remember that people who smoke and are also exposed to asbestos fibres are at a much greater risk of developing lung cancer. When materials that contain asbestos are disturbed or damaged, fibres are released into the air. When these fibres are inhaled or ingested, they can cause serious diseases. Asbestos in the form of related lung cancer deaths kills around 2,500 workers in the UK each year. This is more than the number of people killed on the road. Plumbers, electricians, joiners, and other general maintenance workers need to realise the hard-hitting fact that every week on average, 20 tradesmen die from this hidden killer. Here we have some historical uses of asbestos. Boiler flues, spray coatings to ceiling walls, beams or columns, loose asbestos in ceiling floor and wall cavities, fire breaks above ceilings, textured coatings and paints, floor tiles, linoleum and adhesives, string seals on radiators, storage heaters, fire blankets, brake and clutch linings, wall cladding and partition walls. Here we have a picture showing the use of asbestos and how it's clearly marked. As you can see from this picture, asbestos can also be present in unexpected places. PPE and RPE. Personal protective equipment. Asbestos removal operatives must wear disposable overalls type 5 particle tight, boots without laces or boot covers, and respiratory protection. There are three types of respiratory protective equipment: disposable respirators with FFP3 type filter, half face masks, and full face masks. Emergency procedures. If you discover or disturb asbestos, stop work immediately. Prevent access to the area. Report to the person in charge. Minimize the spread of contamination to other areas. Keep exposures as low as you can. Clean up the contamination by following the Health and Safety Executive Asbestos Essential Sheet EM1 guidance shown on the next slide. Emergency Procedures HSE EM1. This flowchart is to be used if you come into contact with asbestos. So today we have discussed what asbestos is, the effects of asbestos on health, main diseases, legislation, uses of asbestos, where it can be found in buildings, how to avoid risk, PPE and RPE, and emergency procedures. You should now be able to name the three main types of asbestos, list the diseases caused by exposure to asbestos and understand the increased risk for smokers, list some of the likely uses and locations for asbestos products in buildings, know how to avoid the risks from asbestos, and explain the general emergency procedures should asbestos be discovered or disturbed. This concludes our somewhat condensed asbestos awareness course. The full version is available to book through the CITB NI office, either for training carried out in your workplace or on the mobile training unit. Thank you for your time and attention from the team at the CITB.